Good evening. How are you today? Well, it's the end of the week. Our weather here today was a little strange. It was hot for a very short amount, and then it was in the 70s all day, off and on raining. So it's in the low 70s right now, and the humidity is like 89, of course, and there's a moistness in the air. And the wind is at 3 miles an hour, although not here anyhow, I don't feel it. The election goes on, and it pays to focus on it. And here's my thesis about these examples that are popping around in my head right now. And my thesis goes like this. There was an election in Virginia several years ago, and it seemed like there were people doing better, Democrats, than we thought would do better. And I thought that one of the reasons candidates opposed to Trump candidates were doing well was because the voters were sick of the harsh, unfair, indecorous attacks and exaggerations and lies and unkindness in the way they ran for office. Now, sometimes we learn from what we did that didn't work, but Trump is apparently not one of those people. A little him in the forehead, that's why his forehead is flat, and it's probably why he lost his hair too. Knock on wood, you never know about those things. So, Trump is nothing if he isn't crude. And one of his, can't even say faux pas for him, because they're so extraordinarily, well, criminal actually, and certainly actionable slanders. He's basically said that, passed on information that Kamala Harris advanced in her career because of sexual favors, and apparently it's more explicit and entirely unsupported, and said specifically about a person who may be certainly considered to be a public person for purposes of libel law, but whoa, that's over the top, and it's certainly reckless, and the intent is malicious, and the factual support for defense is non-existent. So, you get the feeling that he and Vance are old boys. What did Vance have to do to get the people in Silicon Valley to support him? And how did he go from religion to religion? And how does he change his name so many times? You want to talk about suspicious people? These two guys are really something. So I think, they're more akin to imagining them talking about and thinking about booty calls, while Kamala and Tim are rallying the nation in something more like Buddha calls, calling to our better ways, calling to a way of thinking and so forth. Heaven help us that we should refer to Buddha and a nation that's full of Christo-fascists, But we've got them. And then it's not enough. Trump insulted Tim Walz before the National Guard Association of the United States. Do you know what reaction he got? The entire crowd was silent. And why were they silent? Because we are a better people, not just in Virginia, across this nation. And that's why we're going to bury this son of a bitch. Pardon my French. It's been I've had a busy day, so I'm closer to my Irish fighting genes, I think, today than perhaps I may be normally. So the thing we have going on here is we have people running for office like this is some sort of hazing, So let's consider Herr Führer Trump at Arlington National Cemetery. Not only is what happened there offensive on so many levels, it's revelatory of the ignorance of a man who would be president. I don't say being president is a gentle thing, but the precise use of language and decorum is the example that communicates who we are. And by that standard, it looked like he had brown shirts pushing aside a staffer at the Arlington National Cemetery who was telling them they couldn't have cameras and take pictures for a political event at section 60, where the most recent burials had occurred. And it's not enough to say one person says it's okay, because there are all these other servicemen and women who are buried there. Now, this by a guy who just days ago was exalting the presidential medal that was given to a woman, I believe she's from Nevada, whose husband was a multi-million-dollar contributor to Trump's first campaign. And, okay, put that aside. Who cares if they, ruin the standard of excellence by a payoff to someone with a medal. But he doesn't stop there. Trump goes on, as you may recall, basically saying, it's not so good when people get the Congressional Medal of Honor because they're wounded or they're dead and they're posthumous. That is the point. What greater sacrifice, and I can almost hear the words, I must have heard them 1,000 times in my lifetime. What greater sacrifice can someone give than their own life to the defense of the nation, perhaps executing an order that under examination was wrong or didn't make sense? What kind of patriotism or loyalty does it take for a person to say, yes, sir, and charge into the shit? And this guy is there abusing, blundering into the situation in Section 60 at the Arlington National Cemetery. Now, it doesn't end there. They not only push past her physically, it's a woman staffer, they later say she's despicable, and then they say she had an episode of a mental health episode. These guys will say or do anything. They sound like the Hitler Youth. They sound like the brown shirts. They sound like the kind of people that elect, choose, permit a person like Mussolini or Hitler or Putin. Name your desperado who becomes a dictator, and that's who this guy Trump is. It's just not acceptable. But it's what we have. So, do you know whose birthday it is today? You know who Mary Shelley is? Mary Shelley, kind of on a dare, brilliant, accomplished woman. She wrote Frankenstein. And I think she did it on a bet. And I think she wrote it overnight, or certainly the first draft of it, to test the story. It's one of these Legion stories. Now, it's appropriate on this day that one of her possible audition candidates for her book, Rudy Giuliani, has now had his house subject to seizure by the people he slandered to the tune of millions and millions of dollars. How wonderful, don't you think? And I think it's also sweet that Gwen Walz turned on Vance and told him to mind his own business about how they raise children. And she didn't say stuff it, but I would, to say that the only people I'm interested in are those who have their own biological children. Now, at a very young age, I remember hearing that said in the South Bronx by some people. But then, I also saw those same people sometimes, and others, adopt children. My two aunts, Honora and Alma, they spent a lot of time with the foundling. This is one of their missions in life, to put children with families. And so this guy, Vance, such a merde, right? That's what the French would say. He's a piece of merde. This guy would say that all those children should be abandoned, which is the objection to not having any birth control and keeping people ignorant and all those other things. But he would have The unwanted children who are born have no place to go. He would discourage, I don't know if that's one of those deathly mosquitoes that I just pushed away. He would not care about the circumstances of children. I don't know what binds these people to humanity. And I think the answer is they don't have it. I had a case once, and the prosecutor, I didn't realize this until we got into the courtroom at the trial. The prosecutor was tone deaf to human emotion. And I don't mean it's a rally when you go into a courtroom, but it was like insensitive to the things that we identify with as humans if we're working right. And I don't know how much of a factor it was that she lost her objective in that case. But, you know, it's one case, and there could be lots of reasons that I don't know. But when we have people before us all the time, like this team of Trump and Vance, wow, we're put on notice. These guys, they operate in a set of not values, but objectives. Win at any cost. Say whatever's necessary in the moment to carry that moment, ignoring the fact that people actually have a memory and will come back at you and say how wrong you were. But I want to return to my first point, which is years ago when I had this sense in Virginia, and I got it because I was door knocking for candidates at the time. And if you can and you're comfortable with it, do it. And really talk to the people, because you learn things you can't learn from the newspapers, interviews. There's like no other way. And you can read polls and so forth. But what people really feel and what really moves them and what matters to them becomes pertinent and obvious when you're standing on their doorstep and you're talking to them and you're asking them what matters to them. And they tell you. They tell you what, and you know, there's a notion in politics. It's not just the point of view, it's your intensity on that point that moves you to act. When you see these two uncaring characters making promises, changing their mind. I mean, and a recent example is Trump was, I don't know what he was going to do about the amendment to broaden the benefit of women to have more choice and privacy, not less. But it's on the ballot in Florida, and now he's saying as an individual he's going to vote against it because he's getting pressed from the radical right. An interesting idea. You know, Trump is fighting for his life free of imprisonment, free of these cases. This is life or death for him. He doesn't give a damn about the nation. He doesn't care about you or me. He doesn't have a grounding in some philosophy of America except to win. So he is the most unsuited individual for president we've ever had. We've had people run for president with philosophies we could disagree with. But this guy, he has no philosophy except to grab and take and run and do whatever suits him. So I think the benefit of these things I've mentioned are that the nation is seeing them and hearing them. And Trump has lost his evil footing, if you will, in which it appeared he could do the most outrageous things and not lose a step as a candidate. And that appears to be over. We want to keep it that way through the election. I have another confession, which is, and I guess there's nothing really wrong about it, but I don't understand commenting on what Trump is doing that hurts a party. Because to me, Trump is the issue. Everything, every kind of ink in the water, toxin that spreads from this guy is the story, is the moment, is the thing we're concerned about. What he says on issues don't matter because they're never true. He does whatever he wants to do. He is the supreme used car salesman, except he's selling pain and distress. He's selling us out. He's selling out the promise of America. And who can choose that and why? So, that's a couple of thoughts I have on our approaching Labor Day weekend. And if you're a worker and you support Trump, you're supporting a compromise of your own family and your own promise of economic stability, a middle class belonging, or better than that. If you're a person that cares to speak freely and to think freely, he's not your man. Neither of these two guys are, by the way. So, that's what I got today, and I say goodbye to you from my cathedral near trees, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.